Hey everyone, Sim for the Future here, and today I want to take a look at Sandman Pro by Unfiltered Audio. And this is mostly to get a little bit out of the Arturia takeover of my channel. Let's do something else. And this overview has been on my list for a long time, but because I had some technical limitations and I didn't feel like I could do it justice, I kind of left it in the dirt, I guess. Which is a shame, because I should have talked about this way earlier, because it's a really fun plugin and it deserves a little attention, I think. So, just to get a few things out of the way, I do beta test for Unfiltered Audio, but this is a product I bought myself. It's actually one of the first VSTs I actually spent money on after seeing a video of Andrew Wang using it. It was in the creation of his weird gear. Not quite sure which video it was, but this is not a paid for ad or anything. This is just me professing my love to this great little plugin, which is surprisingly flexible for a delay plugin. It's just more than a delay plugin, really. A lot of this stuff is rather basic, so I'll timestamp pretty much all the different parts. So if you're not all that interested in just the delay and more interested in the weirdness, you can just follow the links in the description for the timestamps, or they will be in the video as well. So without further ado, let's just get diving into Sandman Pro by Unfiltered Audio. And for this demo I will be using Addictive Keys by Excellent Audio with the electric grand piano, which sounds a little bit like this. Weird jazzy chords. Alright, here we go. So let's start left to right. You have your input volume going into the delay. You have your pen, which is the pen going into the delay. So if I set this to the left, probably a good time to say it's a good idea to wear headphones in this one. And let's actually hard mix it. There we go. Everything on the left. Everything on the right. Or unaltered. And you can also set it to mono if you want to have your patch in mono. And underneath you will find the sample rate, which is pretty interesting because it changes the entire sample rate of the entire plugin, which is pretty weird. We'll definitely show it with the buffer, what sort of weirdness it can do, but for now let's just turn it down a little bit. So that's pretty weird. Next to that we find the delay time, so let's put it back at 50. Pretty basic stuff, really short. To pretty long. Go. And you can either have it linked, offset, or independent. So if you want to create a simple ping pong, you can do this. Or you can make it really weird. And in offset mode, you set the left one and the right one will be offset from the left one. And you can of course time sync it or tempo sync it, or have it just unsynced, in which case you can go all the way up to 10 seconds of delay, which is pretty damn long. Next to that you will find the lock time, in which case the delay time will not be affected by the sample rate changes. Which will mostly be interesting once we get more into the buffer stuff, I think. Let's skip over the buffer and let's move underneath. First you have a classic tape delay, which means that you actually if you change the delay time and get the change in tone. There we go. We can saturate it. And Then add whoa and slew if desired. And with the slew, you can change how fast how fast the sound adapts to the new delay times. If you can make it either really snappy or pretty slow. Let's move on to the left. We get feedback, which is just straight on feedback. Nothing new there. And next to that is the X feedback, the crossover feedback, which is pretty interesting. Easy way to make a ping pong delay is just by panning your incoming sound all the way to one side and using the X feedback, because in this instance it will take the feedback and change the channel of your feedback. So it will start on the left and it will go to the right, then it will get back into the delay and it will go to the left, right, left, etc. There we go. You can also diffuse the sound. If you turn down the sample rate a little bit and turn the feedback up a little bit. You get this really weird metallic-like reverb, which is pretty cool. High pass and low pass for your echoes. And here is your output with a clipper. The mix. There's also a mid-side mode. Left output becomes mid. Right output becomes side. That can be interesting if you're working in a mid-side configuration. And here's your stereo width, going from mono to extra wide. And that's your basic delay function. So far this isn't very exciting. This is just a delay, albeit a pretty good delay, but we get a little bit more here. For instance, we can choose different types of delays. Modern instant means that if you change your delay time, you don't get the sort of tape catching up effect. So you get none of the swooping noises. You can add a bunch of noise to it if you want to. And you also have some jitter, which makes it a little bit unstable in the timing. You get the pitch shifter delay. Extra fun if you add feedback. You can actually unlink these as well, so if you want one side to shift faster than the other, you can do this. And if you want to be especially annoying, you can create it with the X feedback in the ping pong. The glitch shifter delay, which adds all sorts of weirdness. Let's link them together. Pretty glitchy. Let's make sure the delay line is clean again. Let's go into multi-tap. Multi-tap allows you to do a longer, even sort of delay. So let's say 9 taps. You can also change the amplitude between the tabs. So this way it behaves more like the feedback, except there is a very definite end to it. And you can change the spacing to make it go faster the more taps have been done. Oh, this is actually slower, this is faster. That's a pretty weird little thing. And we get reverse, which is pretty obviously a reversed. Pretty cool effect, and just like the modern instant, you also get the dirt and slew to add a little bit of noise and grit to it. Pretty cool effect. And there's also a no echo, in which case it does nothing except it can add dirt. Which doesn't sound very useful, but actually it's one of the more fun features, because this way you can use the sleep buffer, which is a pretty cool part of this plugin. So the length of your buffer is determined by the delay time you set. And there's this thing that it doesn't update here unless you actually hit the sleep buffer, which is a little bit tricky, but you can get used to it. There we go. Now I'll turn it down a little bit, because this is going to be a bit annoying otherwise. Down here we can see our buffer, and we can actually adjust the buffer length while it is buffered. And with these little thingies you can change the start and end position. And if you cross these over, it will reverse your buffer. But you can also use the reverse button up here. So that's pretty cool. If you set it into the locked mode, it will keep this length no matter how large you make your selection. So it will essentially slow down your selection to fit into this length. You can also choose to use the filters in your buffer mode. And smoothing can smooth the transitions a little bit. Of course, this depends a little bit on your sound source as well. It doesn't always work equally well. And that's your sleep buffer. You can kill your buffer, in which case it completely empties your buffer. So that's pretty cool, cool stuff right there. And to add some extra flavor, you also get modulation options for all these parameters. All the parameters where you see the little dot. So also in these corners, there's a little dot. Here's a little dot. These are parameters you can actually modulate with the built-in modulators. So this is pretty nice if you don't use something like Bitwig with easy modulation access. You can just use these little modulators, which do some basic forms. Input following, macro control, sample and hold. And also a simple step sequencer. And this is really where things start to shine, because now you can actually modulate parameters and create some really weird noises. So let's do the most simple thing of all. And it's especially fun to use the sleep buffer in automation in your DAW, because that way you can really precisely trigger your sleep points. In drum fills, for instance, you can make it sleep on a snare cycle and do the fast snare things where you can put it on your hi-hats and make kind of like the trap sprinkly hi-hat thing. That's pretty efficient for that. And for overall just wacky sounds, it's pretty cool. So this is a really weird patch. Now, obviously, this is pretty overkill on the modulation, but it's just an example of just how extreme of a sound you can get from it. It goes always from the piano sound, just our basic piano, all the way into And for inspiration, there's a pretty good library of sounds in here. So yeah, fun times with this plugin. A lot of options, a lot of possibilities. There's actually tricks you can do with this, which are pretty neat. Like for instance, if you were to put this on vocal, you could make it input follow. So while the vocalist is singing, you could, for instance, lower your mix, so the delay is less there. And when the vocal ends, so the input ends, the delay opens up. I think that's a pretty neat feature. So in this case, it's the wrong way around.
My home is with you. 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 My home is with you.
And there's basically endless possibilities to do weird things. So let's mess around with Sandman on drums for a little bit. So what I set up here is a 1 bar delay time, and I've set Reaper to start the buffer after 1 bar. So what essentially happens here is when we turn on XO and we start the transport, keep an eye on sleep. And we have now captured 1 bar. So if I turn off XO, we are now listening. Turn it down a little bit. We are now listening to the buffer of Sandman repeating this beat indefinitely as long as the sleep is on. And I can actually not stop it because we capture it again. There we go. Now I can actually change the length of the buffer while it's still playing. Oh, let me turn lock length off. No, can actually half time it. Reverse it. If we turn off the lock length, we can make repeats. If we lock length, we can make really dramatic sounds. We can also do the time lock and mess with the sample rate. And if we don't have it in time lock, so this gives a lot of opportunities to do really strange stuff, and I will show you a little hi-hat trick in a little bit, but for now let's turn on XO again and let's dive into some presets using drums as our source, just to give you a little bit of an idea. This is actually pretty groovy. So needless to say, there's a really wild world well beyond your basic delay out there to discover, which I think is pretty amazing. It's one of those tools that, while it's being promoted as a delay, it's definitely a lot more than just a delay. It does all sorts of interesting and wacky things. So just to do a little quick other thing, and for this we have to do a little bit of routing to make sure everything is going where it should be going. So now we have our hi-hats on a separate track, and now we can process just the hi-hats with Sandman. There we go. It's, by the way, a trick I use a lot to double up on the hi-hat, is just to throw a delay on it. Actually sounds pretty cool. Nice simple little trick. But that's not what it's all about today. What we are going to do is actually, we are going to speed up the hi-hats a little bit. So the hi-hat is probably going to be in the start of the sound. So let's just put it here. Let's take the modulation. Let's take a step sequencer. Let's make it quarter notes. This is a little bit of a gamble because it's quite hard to see. I'm still secretly hoping that we will eventually see a remake in the new layout. So one trick you can use is actually change the length to see where the correct spot is. So there's one here, that's 4. Rotate it into a sleep buffer. And let's do 8. And let's do 10. Oh, this sucks. Yeah, so this is what I really hate about this old setup. It's a bit annoying when you make mistakes, you can't really correct it unless you completely delete the thing. But this shouldn't trigger them, I think. Oh, we need to drag them down maybe. See, activates, 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 doesn't activate. Okay, so we can drag them down. That's pretty cool. So we can actually also do this on 2. It's a pretty simple trick to add some variation in. If you make this length different from your actual loop length, it will constantly shift a little bit, creating some extra variation. Of course, you can make these bursts faster or slower if you want to. You can put it all the way to 16th. So now our step sequencer is out of sync, so every time it's sleep buffers, it's actually not on a hit, so it becomes a silence instead of a hit. And if we speed up the buffer a little bit, we can probably get them back in sync. So it takes a little bit of messing around, but you can definitely do some interesting little tricks to create weird hi-hats. And you can of course just take one of the presets as well. For instance, the polyrhythm is pretty cool. If you want to make really weird, progressive-like stuff, it's pretty cool. I like this way of messing around with hi-hats because you can add flavor without having to completely think everything out. You can also apply it to bass drums or snares or whatever to create some pretty funky effects. So that's one of the reasons why I like Sandman a lot. It's not just a delay tool, it's a very useful delay tool. It covers all the basics with the different delay modes and with a very simple setup. With the UI, it's very easy to use. But at the same time, you can just completely destroy sounds with it, which I think is pretty cool. And definitely something that can be extremely useful or create extremely annoying noises. And both are completely awesome. So yeah, Sandman Pro by Unfiltered Audio. One of those plugins that I think more people should be aware of because it's a pretty interesting glitching tool, it's a pretty interesting rhythmic tool, it's a pretty interesting pitch shaping tool if you want to. Of course, aside from this automation, you can also use your DAW automation, which definitely opens up some windows where you can punch on the sleep on specific times for specific beats to be repeated or stuff like that. You can actually even use it as a very lo-fi limited looper because you can just sleep buffer up to 10 seconds or a full bar, so you can just loop in a bar of whatever you want and mess around with it. So yeah, that's it for now. It already is a pretty long video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit about the Unfiltered Sandman Pro plugin, and I'll see you around.